I wonder if everyone could take their seats so we can start, please. Free advertising, I guess. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Lauer,
Here.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Malumboy,
Here.
Alderman Burgess,
Here.
Alderman Painter,
Here.
Alderman Schmidt,
Here.
Alderman Black, Alderman Hallman, Alderman Fruin,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. And we're going to start with a really, really fun part of our meeting. And we have award certificates for the Bloomington 101 participants. And Nora, would you please come forward? Thank you, Nora. This is part of our movement toward, openness and transparency across the board. And I want to thank Nora for taking the lead on this. And if you could just give us a real quick backdrop of background of the Bloomington 101.
Of course, and thank you, Mayor, Council, and City Manager Hales for supporting this program. We have just completed our 5th session of Bloomington 101, which is an excellent opportunity for our citizens to get better informed and better involved with their local community and their local government. We cover all topics from Parks and Rec to fire and police and everything in between, including giving our participants the opportunity to sit in your chairs as well and grapple with some of the decisions, the difficult decisions you have to make all of the time.
And they probably don't know that their names were up here. And then when we
Probably
voted last time, it did not show the aldermen and women. But anyway, thank you, Nora and David, for really taking the lead on this and doing a great job. The people who've gone through just continue to sing praises, and they continue to help feed our board and commission appointments and get involved in people who might not have in the absence of all of your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to those participants and those that could join us here this evening. It's really amazing to see people take 10 weeks, 2 hours every week to devote themselves to this activity. So thank you for supporting it, and thank you all who participate, and we'll open applications again for the spring in January. So with that, Mayor, if you'd like to...
All right, yeah. Actually, you excuse me, want to come over here? And I'll hand them to you. We can both shake everybody's hands. Andy Finks? Andy's not? Well, thank you, Andy, for participating. Oh, I know she's here. Excuse me, Cheryl Zane. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Excuse me. Got something stuck in my throat. Oh. Debbie Hanchett. Excuse me. Debbie. It's not here. Dion Blake. Okay. Emily Vigneri. Thank you. Great, Emily. Good to see you. Thank you. Fasil Rashid. So much, congratulations. Boo. I can chew gum and walk at the same time. Gabe Goldsmith. Okay. Is it Gus Buderock? He's not here to hear me mispronounce his name, huh? Gus? No? Okay. Jeanette Carney? Sorry. Jeff Henry? Right here. Joyce Tucker? Joyce? Right here. Katie McHugh? Katie? Kelsey West? Kelsey? Okay. MacArthur, Thelemach? Okay. Sorry, how did I mispronounce it there? Marie Vose? Marie? Nikita Richards. I don't see Nikita. Nikita, how could she not be here? Okay. Bring it down to her in legal. And Rod Smithson? In keeping with everything, we have this here. Thank you. Thanks. Roger Cook. Sarah Phylos, is it? Sarah? Okay, thanks. Okay. Shalendra sign? Shalendra? No? Okay. Well, thank you all, and we'll make sure that the participants get these, and my liquids can come back, so I'm safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nora.
Right.
That might have been 401. Yeah. Okay, at this point, we have public comment. We only have one person, and that is Gary Lambert, and you know the drill, Gary.
Good evening. I was reading the paper this morning. There's an article called Normal Looking at Small Property Tax Rate. Then I went back this afternoon online and was reading the comments for that article. And there was one that I felt that applied equally well to this council. This is from the real Illini fan, whoever that is. Should anyone be surprised, the council is asking for higher taxes. Duh. I love how the town, I can't read that word, this tax request by saying the increase will be used to pay for pensions that are required by state law. Maybe if the town didn't spend money on, say, buying the old sailor's home in North Normal, or say, spending money on a bike rental business, or the Route 66 Museum, and the list goes on and on. That's not even counting the property they acquired in the uptown area that they ended up giving to developers, prime real estate. The council would have the money to fund the pensions if they would quit giving it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We, just so everyone knows that if you want to actually have a dialogue and talk to us and maybe get answers in real time, we do have a mayor's open house every Friday before a Monday city council meeting from 4:30 to 5:30. You don't have to make an appointment. Doesn't have to be dealing with a topic that's on the agenda. So please feel free to stop by. Otherwise, in public comment, we don't respond. Next, a consideration of approving the committee to hold minutes of October 17th, 2016. Is there either a motion to approve or are there changes? Moved by Alderwoman Black as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Painter. Any other comments? Do you want to go ahead and we're going to do the electronic voting? I guess we can do that. There we go. All right. And your names are back on, just FYI. 8-0. Okay. All right, next we move to presentation of two projects for the One Voice Advocacy Program in March 2017. And just for the audience's clarification, the One Voice is a project where in March, community leaders from Bloomington, Normal, McLean County, business, labor, people of all political stripes go to Washington and we advocate with one voice for programs or projects that will benefit our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Karch.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council and City Manager Hales. Tonight should be very brief. It's really a primer for the next Monday night, where we're going to be asking you to take action on a couple of different items. There are going to be two projects we're going to be discussing that you're very familiar with. One of them is Hamilton Road project. First, we'll brief the projects. This one we've talked about quite a long time. It's somewhere between $14 and $15 million. It is the hole in the donut. We've talked about it has economic development impact. It has connectivity impact, and it also has safety impact at the intersection of Rhodes and Morrissey. That intersection is one where that would be going away when this project is complete. This road would be anticipating to handle about 15,000 vehicles a day, and it would be the major southern east-west corridor throughout Bloomington. And the council, in past councils, have invested about $20 million to date on this corridor. So this would kind of be that last piece. Keeping in mind, I'd also like to point out that we already are on target with the Fox Creek Bridge bike to Danbury to continue that work on that project. So that has not changed. This is a discussion on the Hamilton Road Bund Commerce Hole. The next project to briefly discuss is the Main Street Corridor. This is Business 51. This is one that you'll recall we actually went for a Tiger grant discussing with really funded by and promoted by the Illinois Department of Transportation. Bloomington, Normal, and McLean County all came together, and other key stakeholders, to try to really advocate for a corridor project right through the heart of the community. This is one where we were looking at redoing the road entirely, looking at everything from complete streets, making sure the road itself and some of the underground infrastructure, everything is stable and sufficient to handle what it has. Again, this is a major key regional impact, and so because of that, this is another project we're looking at. What are we asking for next week of both of these projects? First, for One Voice. For One Voice, as the mayor mentioned, really in March of 2017, it is a lot of different stakeholders all going to Washington, D.C. to advocate for some different projects with our major elected officials. And so we're asking for two different things from you as a council next Monday night. One, support to be a regional partner as well with this Main Street project. So we're wanting to submit an application to EDC so that we can be considered, and we can consider this project for that larger regional impact. Town of Normal is doing the same thing. We have been told that, so we're also kind of partnering with them and others in the area on that project. The second one is One Voice for the Hamilton Road Bund of Commerce. For multiple years, the council has had that project as a high priority project. We've tried for Tiger grants, Fast Lane grants. We've tried for every different type of funding source. We've continued to move forward with phase one of that project. And it is coming to the point where we are working with administration on when is that key time for us to have to make a decision on funding. And so we've continued to try to find alternate funding sources, so far unsuccessfully. And this is one more attempt. If we can either get One Voice assistance or if we can get fast lane assistance. That's the other one. We're trying to supplement our own funds on that, but we're getting to the point. It's key. We've talked about this before, but it's coming soon to where we have to make a decision on this project, whether we're going to move forward with alternate funding that would be all city funding. So with that being said, this is short and sweet, and I'll leave the rest of the time for questions in preparation for next Monday night.
Questions, comments, observations? Alderman Fruin.
Thanks, Jim. We have talked about these for a long time, and without seeing the report next Monday, I suspect I'm going to be very supportive of both of them. I hope at some time our council can talk about all the projects, the road projects that we've identified. Most recently, the one that's been in the paper is Euclid and Washington, and I've been out there to see that. It just seems to me that we've got all this conversation in our retreats and everything else that we always talk about. We've got too much on our plate. We can't do it all. So I hate to see us redo engineering studies with regard to roads, and I know we've done that at times, had to redo some design work, some engineering work in years past. And I just hope our council can have some discussion to see where these things are on our priority list, and let's focus on the ones we can commit to and can get done. And if we don't have enough money to go down the list too far, I'm one voice, but I would suggest that we back off some of these things until they percolate up to the top. But these two are very crucial. Your illustration shows it, and so thank you for all the work you've done on these two.
Alderwoman Burgess, Schmidt, and Black.
Thank you. Obviously, we know that competition for these particular grants at the federal level it's always very, very competitive. Is the funding level, though, do we know if it's been steady? Were both of these, I know that they passed a 5-year transportation bill. Will it stay steady as a result of that, or could we expect changes based on the most recent election?
What we're hearing is that we do anticipate some changes coming in the next year for overall funding. The level and where it's going to be at, even if Tiger will be renewed, we don't know. There's been a lot of discussion on, will it be the same type of funding source? Will they come up with some new acronyms? Who knows? But the bottom line is we do anticipate on seeing some changes. There's been a lot of discussion in the transportation boards on what's going to be happening. So yes, that is accurate. So it could also be very supportive. There's been, as we know, there's been a lot of discussion about increased investment in infrastructure, but that's wonderful talk, and we'll be glad to see some actual funds coming our way.
Alderwoman Schmidt, Black, and Sage.
Yes, thanks, Jim. Regarding the Main Street corridor, I'm thinking about the downtown plan that we've adopted and the road recommendations, transportation recommendations around what people call the buckle on East and Madison, and just wondering about some of the ideas that are put forth there and how they might roll into this. I know downtown Bloomington workers and residents are interested in thinking, adopting some of those ideas, so I don't know whether they're in, if there's any kind of tension between what you think might come out of this, assuming it's funded, or...
Yeah, I think there will be some, just being honest, I think there'll be some tension. I think that Illinois Department of Transportation, some of the ideas that came up with as far as road diets and doing some of these have been tough for Illinois Department of Transportation. While I think we've looked inside of for example, painting traffic control boxes. That's a good example. We've been able to paint those inside of the, inside of the couplet, but we haven't been able to receive permission to do that on more of the state routes. So the point is it actually is state-controlled right-of-way. There is, though, I will give full credit to IDOT, there is some movement as far as seeing the welcoming more of this, that complete street concept. So there has been some shifts within the state in that direction, but that the plan itself, that original plan you're referring to, does have quite a bit outside of the box. It also will have some extra cost that maybe IDOT would be open to if the city were to partner with them on that additional amount. I know that IDOT has said in past in letters, we'll give the whole thing to you if you want it, and I've screamed, no, please, no, we have enough. So let's keep that let's keep that theirs.
Thanks, Jim.
Alderman Black.
Thank you, and thank you, Jim. I'll be brief. We've talked about this countless times since I've been up here, and other than the bridge issue, which I think is a critical need due to a safety issue, I've kind of reached the end of the rope on my interest on the Bund of Commerce piece. I mean, we've brought this on in one voice. It's been rejected. I mean, what's the definition of insanity? And I think at this point, this might be my last voices support for this project, and then if it doesn't go through, I think we have lots of other pressing needs in our community that we can spend that money on big time.
Alderman Sage.
Jim, is the Bund to Commerce, the Hamilton Gap project, close to being shovel-ready?
It would be really 2019, 2020, in that range. I mean, so it would be a couple of years out, even if the council chose to float a bond outside of all of the other discussion, it still is going to be a few years out. It really is. It's, yeah.
And why would the time lag be out 3 years?
For about a $15 million job in coordination with the railroad. We actually have a timeline and a schedule that we'd be glad to send out to the council, but it lays out the various phases of design, land acquisition, and for a project that size, 2019 is about as soon as it could get underway.
Okay. Well, I guess I would echo what Alderman Fruin said. I mean, I would be supportive of this being part of the One Voice advocacy effort. And then let's see what happens after that. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Jim. Thanks for all your hard work on this. Appreciate it. Thanks. Now, we move right along to our presentation of the culinary water portions of a 5-year capital improvement plan. So we now have Bob Yale from our water department and presentation and council discussion. Hit it, Bob.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, City Manager Hales. It's with pleasure I get to speak to you about the Culinary Water Capital Improvement Plan. All of myself and all of staff is excited that I'm up here speaking to you. We're going to discuss it in a kind of programmatical or divisional type of manner. We're going to outline throughout those projects, they're going to focus on regulatory compliance, water quality, and customer service. So everything we're going to go through fits into one of those and make sure that we are meeting all regulations. So we've listed a lot up on the screen. We're not going to hit every single one of them. Mercifully, we'll leave out billing and collections and lake parks maintenance and infrastructure. So with that, we'll start going through. But before I go to my programs, says resurfacing coordination. It's transmission distribution as well. I'm going to kind of carry on with what Mr. Karch has been talking with the resurfacing program. There's been a lot of different discussion about different funding levels for the resurfacing program, whether that's $4 million, $10 million, $8 million. I just want to put that emphasis in there that the water department certainly has our infrastructure underground as well. The staffing resources we have, the funding resources we have would be stretched very thin and more than likely wouldn't be able to support a large infrastructure program. So as that continues to be developed, talking with City Manager Hales and Jim, we're including that in the conversation about how we fund that, how we staff that to make sure that's a project we can push forth with whatever's decided. I thought this was a great graphic. It's not my doing, but it shows a lot on the top of the surface, which gets a lot of the press, a lot of discussion. But as you can see, water main is one of the utility infrastructures underground. We're in the process of evaluating, prioritizing to determine where those are, but we just simply need some more time to get caught up. Also, just last point on that is with water main design, there is design involved, there is permitting involved, there's EPA permits. So the process to go from we want to do a project to actually being shovel ready takes a little bit longer than some might think. So just putting that in the back of your mind as we go forward. We're going to start with administration, planning per se, infrastructure master plan. Though the water department certainly has a number of plans and reports that have been done over the years, most all of them are pretty dated. They all need to be updated in some sense. They all need to be collated together, help us determine what that master plan looks like for the department in general. With streets, sewer, and storm, they're a little bit ahead of us in this game. So one of the projects we have in this year's fiscal year is to do an infrastructure master plan. Helps us guide to where we're going to go the years forward. So capital improvement plan I'm presenting tonight and is in there most likely will change a little bit after we have some additional research and review on that. Water rate study, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but we will have to look at that after the infrastructure master plan to see how we fund the personnel and the equipment and the capital projects to continue forth with that program. So that's something that usually follows after the master plan. We've got it scheduled in the capital improvement plan as well. Project management, I just want to thank everybody around the horseshoe, Mr. Hales as well. We have an outside consultant that's in our office. He joined us about 8 or 9 months ago. Since then, we've also had our full-time engineer position that was vacant forever get filled. It's really been the catalyst to allow us to dig into some of our projects, to dig into our priorities, to dig in and help support our superintendents that do the operation and maintenance on a day-to-day business. Mostly, We focus on operations and maintenance with some billing and cash collections, and now we've got some support, some expertise to help us through these type of processes, which we're talking about tonight, so I thank you for that. With that being said, we still don't have enough horsepower. We're doing a lot of design this year, which is great. I brought a lot of stuff to you. There's still more to come in the next few months. But to be honest with you, we don't have the staff to go inspect and observe the construction that's going to come next year, next fiscal year, and the ones after that. So in next year's budget, we're requesting additional contract administration work to come in and help us watch a number of projects to make sure the infrastructure goes in correctly. Future water supply planning. Had the pleasure of bringing the St. Peter Aquifer to you a number of months ago. The draft justification report is very close to being done. They're going to start on design with the intent of getting that ready for bidding yet this fiscal year. That'll guide us into the reconfiguration of the plant, let us know how much water is available, and also kind of set the tone or the time frame for where we need to look in the southwest well field or nitrate removals and all those types of things. So that one is one that's in the plan moving forward and have a direct impact into other things that come up in the next couple of years. This I have to thank Russ Waller and Facilities. On the screen here, they've stepped up and have offered to help us with a few projects up there. The picture in the bottom right, we did not Photoshop the snow in there, and I'd be fibbing if I said that was snow from last year. But what you're seeing is our main gas line coming into the plant that's not quite buried the whole entire way. So Russ and his staff have volunteered to help us design and get that buried again. We also have some roofs that need to replace. They're very aged. They're leaking. We've had to do repairs recently, as well as boilers. If anybody's been to the plant, you know it's not a well-conditioned location, but there are some areas we need to condition it with some basic heating and cooling. So they volunteered to help us with those as well. Again, still on the plant and treatment, the top left is Lake Bloomington. The bottom right is Lake Evergreen. Those are, I'm going to use the same terminology, like aged infrastructure. We haven't done a lot to those spillways. We, of course, replaced the Evergreen Bridge a couple of years ago, but the spillway itself, the drainage around them, it's undermining. There's a lot of faults in the concrete. We need to do joint sealing to make sure we maintain our infrastructure and keep it there for years to come. So we're working through the finalized design contract that we hope to bring to you in the next couple of months as well. Again, still at the plant, recarbonation bypass. Every process at the plant has a certain million gallons a day capacity. We've repurposed our recarbonation basins to a secondary settling basin, but everything still goes through that. It's not necessarily the primary treatment, but it's a helpful treatment. We're looking at ways to bypass that when we need to produce a higher quantity of water so that we can get more out of the plant and meet the needs of our customers. So we're going to look to a way to divert some of that water past that, but still go through the rest of the treatment train. We're doing some of the initial stuff in-house with the resources I mentioned earlier, from the survey, from the locate, from the initial thought design, but we're bringing that one forth for some additional help in the near future as well. The bottom right, though you can see it's well maintained, pristine, clean, you can tell it's aged just by the decor. That is the filter gallery in the original plant. Those filters, some are non-operational. The pieces and parts have been scavenged for other filters, so we need to go in there in the near future and either rebuild those or look at to see if we want to expand new filters in the new building. Shoreline, I've brought a couple projects forth since I joined the water department. Thankfully, you've been supportive of that. We are currently underway at the one that was approved a couple months ago at Evergreen near the campground. It's a new pilot project, an innovative technique. The contractor builds the road on the side of the water, and he builds out in the water as he goes. It keeps the vegetation in place. I've seen pictures. It looks very nice. They're doing a great job, so we'll continue with those. Electrical conversions. The top right is the pumping station at Lake Evergreen. When we pump from Lake Evergreen, it gets piped from Lake Evergreen to Lake Bloomington. A portion of that station is on 480 volts, a portion on it is 2400 volts. We're going to bring that project forth probably in December for you to hopefully allow us to do a consultant design to bring the 2400 volt down to 480 volt. It allows us to work on our system. It's more cost effective utilization. And Ameren serves both 480 and 2400, but they've only got one extra transformer for the high voltage. If it goes, they've told us for years, they can't replace it. We're out of luck. So we need to get ahead of the curve and get this in process and get this one up to date. Top right, this one, we're issued the notice to proceed tomorrow. It's the arc flash, or it's an incident energy from electrical equipment that can flash out towards somebody working on equipment. You've approved that one recently too. We're working forth on that one. Bottom left is a great project. It's supervisor control and acquisition data. It's the SCADA system. It's kind of the eyes and ears, the recording, and the controls of our system. Everything comes back to certain monitors. We can see certain things. We can control certain things. It's done with a programming language that only a few people can understand, and obsolete parts that we can't replace. So we replace some parts and put the old parts on the shelf. So that one's coming. We're all excited about that, to bring that from decades ago to the current stage, to where I could actually log on and see how our plants are doing, what it's producing, and interface with the operators. Maintenance storage, we have about, 21.4 million gallons of water, finished water in storage. If you think about that for a minute, that's a lot of water. It's spread out in a couple different spots. We haven't given its due diligence, as we should recently, to inspect those tanks, both underground, above ground, and at ground level. And so we'll be wanting to review those to make certain that we don't have any infrastructure that will cost more in the future if we could repair something small at this time. Some of that's a visual inspection, some of it's sticking a camera down the tank and letting the little robot go around. So I could go through the rest. I try not to talk about all of them, just kind of give you a brush of everything going on. Transmission distribution. This is when I'm sure the crowd behind me is going to perk up, pay attention, and I'll start with this. What I'm showing on here doesn't necessarily show the top 5. It shows the great need. We need to rebuild our replacement program. The one in the bottom left is Zurich Drive. It's one that wasn't in, actually, if you go back to the June, July issuance of the draft capital improvement plan, not there. We've had a lot of breaks, a lot of leaks out there. It's kind of filtered itself to the top by nature, and it's one we have to look at, and we're looking to see if we can't still design that and construct it, redo that one next year. So as the public is looking at this, it isn't the priority, it's just a breadth of need. We're stepping back, trying to assess our system, determine priorities. We unfortunately don't have a great rating system on our water mains. You've seen lots of street ratings, you've seen lots of sewer ratings. If you're going to ask me for a rating for the water mains, I'm going to tell you, I can tell you where the main breaks were over the past 6 or 8 years, and that's the extent of what we have. So we're working on updating the GIS, updating our water model, updating our rating structure, so we can start picking those out and seeing where we really need to focus our effort. And that's, we say 350 to 400 miles. Again, we're updating GIS to be a little bit more accurate. So, but just in the breadth of that, I just want to show that how many miles there are in that. Again, transmission and distribution. We talked about more of the distribution mains in the subdivisions. Transmission mains, which you can see are much larger. In this case, one of the projects that's critical to us is the pressure control stations. We need to install valves when it comes into town, at Fort Jesse, where most of the water comes in, and again at Division Street, to help maintain and ensure we have the minimum regulatory pressures that the EPA are looking for to make certain we're providing the quality water that everybody deserves. So that one's being fast-tracked in as well. It's one that we've recently discovered that didn't get done completely, so that one's coming as well. There's also, we need to do more research, but the master plan will help us. There's about 3.5 miles of 36-inch water main that hasn't been installed up near the plant. That will allow us to retire some of our own mains, increase our capacity, so in the high usage times we can make sure we get the water into town. I'm going to touch on the leak detection, water loss prevention. It's often referred to as non-revenue water, water that we produce that we're not able to bill for. So we would be very much remiss if we weren't looking for ways to minimize that. We're striving to create cost-effective service for our customers. We need to put an emphasis on that leak detection. We have a program right now, but we think we could do it better. We're going to create an RFQ to get the best equipment, best personnel that can come in and scour our system over the course of 3 or 4 years, also enable our staff to do some stuff on a day-to-day basis as things comes up so that we can minimize that. It's usually estimated based on the amount of water being lost. We can focus our resources where they need to be, see if it's something we can do with our personnel and equipment, and in the end, provide the most cost-effective water to our customers and not produce it if we don't have to. Be remiss if I left meters out. We're approximately 96 to 97% done with our RF meter program for residential. It's been quite a process. I know it's taken a number of years. It's certainly slowed down dramatically these past couple of years, and specifically the last couple of months. There's There are some people that would rather keep their old meters, and we're working through to try to convince them of ways to allow us in their house that makes it more efficient to us, brings the cost for the system down, allows them to monitor their usage better. It's just not something we've convinced everybody yet. So though we're still doing that, I think last month we did 150 of those, so we're still moving forward, but we're more focused on our larger meters. The meters that we currently have in the system that don't turn unless a lot of water goes through it. So if it's not turning, we're not billing for it. So we want to make sure that everybody's paying for what they're using. So again, it's fair across the system. Those are more expensive. We do less of them at a time, but our staff spends a lot of time sorting through lists, looking at return on investment, and focusing on the bigger compound meters. That, you have a question about funding. You can see in here approximately $27 million. We do have funding for the next several years, so we're in a good place to be there. If I'll say successful if I have to come back in a couple years and say we have an issue with funding, we need to look at our rates, because that means we've made a good effort in updating our system, trying to bring it to current standards and meet all regulatory requirements. With that, I thank you and
Bob?
open up to questions.
Before you close, if you just go back and comment on two things. I want to make sure we emphasize and help the council understand what's going on as far as the so-called interim water supply or the southwest water supply. Would you just kind of make sure and emphasize for the council the role the, let's see, what is it, the St. Peter wells and how that's playing into this kind of interim water supply phase, which they've heard a lot about. And then secondly, talk a little bit, one master plan they haven't seen is the so-called culinary water system master plan. If you could just talk about what they can, expect to see in the future as we try to address that as well.
Sure. Thank you, David. The interim and future water supply plan for a good majority of time was focused in the Southwest. A lot of discussion with different groups, different partner agencies about how that might be interconnected with different surface water, different environmental aspects we need to go through. It's also got a price tag of, tens of millions of dollars. So from our point of view, we're looking for something that we can get better bang for the buck, per se. We've got a great facility up at Lake Bloomington. It, through an Illinois State Water Survey study of the Northern Illinois, it's indicated that it's great potential to drill down about 2,000 feet, get additional water from ground wells. It'll supplement the nitrate water that we get from the reservoirs. It'll be able to dilute that, make the treatment of nitrates less, get more water for the higher demand times, and may delay needing to go to the southwest well field. Also coupled into that, doesn't have anything to do with St. Pete, but a lot of conservation efforts. A lot of people are being more conservation minded. The facilities in our restrooms use a lot less water, so that demand that we were seeing 5 and 6 years ago, just going up, has really peaked off and coming leveling off. It's not just a Bloomington trend. It's not just a Bloomington normal trend. It's a nationwide trend if you search that. So our challenge is to find something more cost effective that meets the needs today and make sure we're still planning for the future. So the Southwest Wellfield is certainly something we're going to continue to talk about. And I know I've got some interest in my email box just from the article that was in the paper, and we'll address, but I don't see that in the next year or two. We're going to really focus on the St. Pete and see what that can do for us and see if we can get a lot more benefit for a lower cost.
Okay. Questions of Mr. Yale?
Water master plan. We've got a lot of aged reports. My back table is full of them. Some have been moved forward. A lot of them have not. We need a consultant to come on board, consolidate, coordinate those, make sure we have the best practices in mind, the newest technologies in mind, make certain that we can help prioritize and utilize the resources we do have moving into the future 2 and 5 and 10 and 20 years. So they're going to take a lot of time to meet with our staff to discuss what it is we actually do, what's in place. They're going to look at the other plans, help us craft that together. They're also, we'll ask them to look at future development. Where should we put transmission mains throughout the community and maybe try to reserve that for future development? It's, we try to protect the corridors we're in, but we realize in the future we need to have some more placement as well, those as well. So it'll help us plan not only infrastructure, but a little bit of future planning as well.
Question, Alderman Sage.
Thank you. And thanks, Bob. And this is, as always, is good work. I've noticed that that's what's missing from the water supply and future planning and maybe it's in there, but it's just not illustrated here, is the Mahomet Aquifer.
Hmm.
So maybe a quick comment on that, and/or then maybe a kind of a compare and contrast between the Mahomet and the St. Peter Aquifer. And first of all, I mean, is the Mahomet, I mean, that has been literally the talk since I've been here.
It has been the talk, and with the recent Illinois State Water Survey's study of northern Illinois, it's become an option that we're just becoming aware of in the last year or 2 years. They've also come on board. We have a contract with the Illinois State Water Survey to help the consultant we have on board for that drilling project to make certain we do our analysis properly, to make sure the conditions are appropriate. When you drill that deep, there's different components of the water you have to worry about. So we're aware that it might not be the same water quality as the Mahomet Aquifer. The Mahomet Aquifer is much shallower. Aquifer has potential to be, I guess, influenced from surface water as well, where this does not as much. So this is a lot less potential to impact private wells. But when I say Southwest Wellfield, that might be the finger of the Mahomet, but I know there's obviously discussion about going way west and hitting the core of the Mahomet. I know there's discussion about regional water planning and supply. This doesn't negate those options. This is just, we would like to take a pause and see if we can achieve something with less cost, less impact, and less heartache to the general public of people that have private wells and still accomplish our goals.
So just kind of a reprioritization of future sources, if you will.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you, Bob.
Alderman Schmidt.
Um,
Wasn't me.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. It was a great presentation and really good overview. I think I have a couple of questions, and I think they're probably more for David. First of all, could you remind us about where we are with the water rate study? And then I want to try to get a better sense of how all of these different potential rate increases might be affecting our residents. So we've got street resurfacing, we've got that budget. We've talked about stormwater, and there's increase. Now we've got this, and that's an increase. And I'm losing a sense of the big picture. And in general, what might an increase look like for an average citizen? So.
First off, we do have an outstanding stormwater and sanitary sewer rate study. It was completed about a year ago, and it will figure into the 5-year CIP. To my knowledge, I don't think we've done a culinary water rate study, or am I?
No, you're correct.
Wrong.
It's a project we're proposing after the infrastructure master plan is complete. We anticipate being able to fund our projects for 2 to 3 years. So in the next couple of years, we'll do that rate study and bring that back for further discussion at that time. Anecdotally, looking at different studies that come across my desk from Illinois, we're in probably the bottom 40%, bottom third. We don't crack the top half as far as our rate. So we're very cost effective for our customers. So we just want to make sure we have the funds to continue to produce the water and regulatory, but we're a couple years off.
And I think the one point I think for everyone to keep in mind is, one reason to have all these master plans is so we can plan. We do know what the priorities are. We do know what the needs are, and we can kind of phase them in over time. And unfortunately, sometimes we haven't had that. And this 5-year CIP will go a long ways to laying out just what we have the existing funding to do, but also what we don't have funding. And as we've said before, sanitary sewer and stormwater is just the opposite of the culinary water fund or enterprise fund. I think we have about 20 million?
20 plus million, yeah.
20 plus million in reserves. We have, I think in stormwater, less than $1 million. And sanitary sewer, it's very, very low. So the need is much greater in those other two, but ultimately, this master plan will help us start to reserve a lot of that money in culinary water. In fact, as you see the 5 years, and even as Bob pointed out, we've got a very aggressive capital improvement program that'll start drawing down on that money, which will delay the need to either borrow, issue debt, or raise rate. But over time, what we have to put in place is an ongoing process to evaluate rates, because our costs will continue to go up for materials, labor, things like that. But hopefully, one day in the near future, you'll see a 20-year culinary water capital improvement plan, the same for every one of these other infrastructures, and they'll be well integrated. But it'll take some time.
I guess I just want to make sure that our message is really clear that we're not adding on incrementally for different kinds of projects, capital improvement projects. So I would, people may think that, okay, their city services bill may be going up X% for stormwater, and then surprise, 6 months later, here's a water increase. Having that bigger picture is an important message.
Yeah. And I think that's what the 5-year, in fact, unfortunately, the big story, I think, in the 5 years is going to be what's not in there, what we don't have, financial reserves to spend money on. So to me, sometimes it's almost as important as what's unfunded. And, water was pretty healthy to be able to fund, what is it, 8 million or something? But that's not going to be the case on some of these others. One last comment too, with all the talk of street resurfacing, I know just the 8 years I've been here, it seems like culinary water, stormwater, sanitary sewer have always been following up and trying to keep pace with street resurfacing, which is good. It's a positive. But sometimes it's been at the detriment of pursuing other water-related projects that unfortunately continue to get pushed to the back because we're trying to keep up with the street resurfacing. And I think you're going to continue to see that. And in fact, one of the thoughts is, and maybe I'll just mention this too, is going forward, we're still going to be on a fast track to help the council be in a position in February, March to consider and approve a 5-year balanced, and I want to emphasize balanced 5-year capital improvement program. And that particular program, as we'll talk in the weeks ahead, will have some element of some borrowing so that we can keep up with both a very robust, aggressive street resurfacing, but it's also going to try and fix what unfortunately has been the case in the past is we've got to start addressing these other projects which are unrelated to some of those street resurfacing, or we just kind of perpetuate, continuing to get behind. So you'll see more of that. And Jim, I think in your comment, I just wanted to add, that is going to be the time when you adopt that 5-year plan. That's where you're going to establish your priorities. And things like Hamilton Bund to Commerce, or, even the project over there with the Fox Creek Road bridge replacement and some of these others, they'll either have, the projects will be in there if there's funding. And if there is no funding, they won't be in there. That will be the definitive time in which you establish those priorities, and even those where we maybe are proposing borrowing money, will be in there, and that's when you say, this is what we can do, but we can't do all these other projects, not because we wouldn't like to, but we've had to draw the line based on what you find as that tolerance level for either current, future revenues, or how we achieve that intergenerational equity on funding, what in some cases are decades-long deferred maintenance in many, many areas.
Alderman Lauer and Black.
Bob, thank you for the presentation. Can you outline a little bit in terms of your proposed timeline for some of these projects and kind of give us an idea of what, in your opinion, is most critical?
Well, I'll start with the latter. Many of them are critical. I'll tie into what David said. We've had aged infrastructure that's been neglected for some time. If we don't address some of these, it will be very difficult to continue to produce the water and meet regulations and allow people to turn their taps on. I think that it would be hard for me to elevate the water supply above some of our maintenance at the plant. It would be harder to delineate those from some of our transmission mains in our neighborhoods to make certain we distribute it to somebody. Our department is so intermixed across the different divisions or programs, it's very hard to delineate which one is more important than the other one. So that might not sound like an answer, but I want to make clear that they're very much intermixed, and we're trying to propose, we're proposing projects that need to be done to continue to move forward and address what hasn't been done.
And so,
Time frame,
yeah,
wise, they're spread out over the course of the 5 years and up to the 10 years. And as David mentioned, he is committing me to a 20-year plan, and we are working towards that. When we prepared for this fiscal year, we scheduled stuff out about 10 years. We're not to the 20-year yet, but we're thinking longer term to see what those are. Some of them in here, as we're going through, may be shifted out a couple years. If we go back to the capital improvement plan that was published by David a few months ago, that kind of outlines that specific schedule, what's in place.
okay. Where does the St. Peter well drilling program stack up in that area? Can you help us a little bit?
That's the
'Cause
current,
that's an addition to what we've currently got.
project. This council approved us to enter into a consulting contract a number of months ago. It's finishing up the justification study to make certain that's justifiable of what we're going to do. They're also designing the wells that we're going to drill, those test wells. The intent to have that design done and bid before the end of this fiscal year to utilize the funds that have been set aside so we can award a contract so that they can start drilling and doing their field work next summer.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Alderman Black. Oh,
Mayor,
yeah.
could I just add too? I think it's important to point out that the St. Peter aquifer wells are also taking the place of some of the Southwest well field project. In fact, I see it as a cost-saving alternative to try to not only push off some of the ion exchange that is very costly. We're trying to push to the future. This could help us, but also it can help us again push off to the future some of the Southwest well field. And finally, I think it's important before that we would want the council to weigh in on a very expensive potential Southwest well field. I think we're going to also be looking at the Muhammad Aquifer because those two very expensive, but also potentially competing projects. I think we need to do some very serious financial analysis because it may be going to the Muhammad Aquifer could be as cost efficient as maybe the other with a higher success rate, of tapping into a lot of water capacity to meet our future growth needs. So, but that maybe helps you
Very well
understand too. It didn't come out of the blue. It was one of these interim lower costs,
Correct.
but trying to save money on these other two on an interim basis.
Very
Alderman
well said,
Black.
David.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple or bring your focus back to some of the staffing challenges that you faced in recent years. And you brought up some consultants that might fill in some gaps here and there. And your department has done this in the past where whenever you bring on somebody from the outside to help bring in perspective or work on a project specific, you really help outline to the public, the real need for that and why it's a better alternative for the taxpayer. Some of these things I'm seeing are kind of perennial issues that you highlighted in your presentation. So my question is, would it be beneficial to just bring on a staff member for some of these project management type issues, or is it more fiscally responsible to continue on a per project consultant type basis?
We're currently, we have hired the outside consultant as one of the engineering staff members. We also filled the full-time position a couple months after that. So we have two full-time engineering bodies looking at this now. We've crafted this as a pilot project, be able to discern answers to the questions that you're asking. I think that it's too early to tell. The water department was very behind in some of this planning and thought process. So to put two people working side by side to catch us up is going to take a year or the 2-year contract to see if it's needed to continue 2 full-time employees after that, or if we get to a certain point, one can maintain that after we get a lot of the breadth or projects out of the way. So I'd like to defer answering that for another 6 or 8 months and let you know then if that's okay.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that because these are the type of things that we need to do to find out what's the best, most efficient way of doing business, and I applaud your department in doing so. I just, from where I sit, I think it's been really a good conversation we've had up here, and I hope that we're giving you the clarity that you need. But again, a lot of the feedback I get from people is we hire too many consultants, and if it does ultimately get a better value than a full-time staff member, to me that's a no-brainer, and we continue down that route.
Thank you. Alderman Milwambwe and Fruin.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question was going in somewhat of a similar direction because I know that in talking with Jim Karsh about streets, we often talk about our capacity to do things. You know, we've talked about doing work for about $8 to $10 million, and that's about the most we can do. So I was kind of curious from a human capital in the area, you know, what are we able to do? Because I'm assuming that you would be talking to contractors in order to be able to accomplish some of the work. So what can we do annually?
We've tried to budget approximately $5 to $6 million worth of capital improvements in a given year. That's what we feel with our current staffing level, with the addition of some consultants to help us with the field observation that I mentioned in the presentation, is something that we can realistically cover. If we push beyond that with our current staff as well as that additional resource for the field, we won't be able to cover that. And I think that's kind of the point I was trying to hit on with the resurfacing program. We struggle to support Jim in his normal everyday program. If we bump that up, that's going to be above the capacity unless I do what David alluded to, is defer some of the other projects and strictly focus on support of the resurfacing, which does not catch us up across the system, which is in dire need.
Alderman Fruin.
Bob, thank you. I think this is more of a comment, but you're welcome to respond, and I'll tie it together with, I think one of David's strengths in recent years has been all the master planning and roadmap work that has been lacking for so long, and he's tried to pull all this together, so I'm a big fan that that needs to be done. I guess to the contrary of that, I'm not really been a fan of rate studies, and I think what our history would show us, I could be proven wrong, but in our rate studies of the past, the consultant has come in and given us some maybe bands or some options. We would suggest you increase your sewer, water, ... And I think what you'd find in the voting record is that the council doesn't have the tolerance to bite off the gold rate. And it might sound simple, but I think it's arithmetic, and I think it's the tolerance of the council. And if our water is here and our sewer is here and ... I think the council can figure that out. What kind of a tolerance level do we have to increase our rates? So it might be after my time, but I just don't know that component of consultant studies giving us advice on rate increases is worthwhile based on past council votes.
Certainly. We'll take that in consideration and certainly speak to Mr. Hales before we move forward on that one.
Great. Thank you. Again, thank you very much, Bob. Thank you, David. Appreciate all that. At this point, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Don't we have to say into closed session?
No, well, we're going back.
Right.
I'll second that.
Separate meeting.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I'm making.
Is there a second?
I will.
Second by Alderman Lauer to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.